Welcome to the Traveller 2025 Mayday event. I'm your host, Frank Succardi of CyborgPrime Games. My guests today are the crew from Ad Astra Games. We have Ken Burnside, the creative director of Ad Astra. We have Mike Llaneza, line developer for Traveller. Jon Zeigler, author of Architect of Worlds. And Matthew Francois, line developer for Attack Vector Tactical. That's a mouthful. Welcome, guys.
Glad to be here.
Hello.
Hello. So, Ken, well, let's go around and everybody introduce themselves. We'll start with Ken. Tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do for Ad Astra.
I am Ken Burnside. I have been writing and developing spaceship combat games since roughly 1990 with some work for Starfleet Battles. Starting around 2001, I started writing my own, although I was still part of Amarillo Design Bureau's crew and am the uncredited co-designer of Federation Commander. For a stretch of time, nearly anything out there that involves spaceships had my name in it as a playtester or developer credit. And that still applies to some things, although I'm mostly focused on my own stuff. In 2004, I published Attack Vector Tactical. In 2005, I won an Origins Award for it. And started doing it more or less as one of my primary sources of income starting around 2007. I wrote and designed 2 editions of Sakanami Island Tactical Simulator, the Honor Harrington spaceship combat game. The second of which came out in 2007 and was a sneak preview sneak preview is a good way to do it. Snapshot is a better way to describe it, of the game that eventually became Squadron Strike, which is sort of my bread and butter product. We also publish Birds of Prey, which is a jet fighter combat game that uses many of the same mechanics and components that we use for 3D space combat stuff. And for certain values of famous, I am famous on the internet for a very narrow demographic of one of the most heavily quoted people on the Atomic Rockets website. And that still turns into a lot of conversations that go to, wait, you're that Ken Burnside?
You have some infamy.
I have some infamy or some fame. I get to design spaceships for a living, and still have to sometimes take an outside of the house job. But I'm one of the lucky so-and-sos that gets to design spaceships for a living.
Yeah, that's cool. All right, cool. Well, thanks for coming back to the event. So I appreciate it. Let's talk to Mike next. Mike Llaneza, tell us a little bit about yourself and your involvement with Ad Astra.
I've been peripherally exposed to Ken and Ad Astra's stuff since I think somewhere in the 90s or very, very, very early 2000s when he popped up on the Ground Zero Games mailing list, which had a very high concentration of exploding spaceships enthusiasts. A lot of it built around the full thrust game, but general spaceship enthusiasts. And Ken popped in and said, "Hey, I solved the displacement problem." Mailing list consensus promptly settled on, "No, you didn't." Then he showed his work, and people said, "Holy shit, yes, you did." I met Ken in person in a trip to San Francisco to do a game demo for Attack Vector. Hooked up at a game store, played the game, met the fellow, continued on a correspondence online, and I think ended up being the 3rd person tapped to do the Squadron Strike Traveller. And I'm the longest I believe I'm the longest surviving Traveller line editor that Ken has, almost literally.
Yes. And actually, you are the 5th person who took on the job.
You broke the curse so far.
Yep. I'm not at the same job I had when I started, but I have a better one, and I am still living in the same place. So, yeah, I think the curse is broken.
All right, cool.
My fees for breaking other curses are going to be eye-wateringly high, but do please reach out if you have one.
All right, cool. Welcome back, Mike. All right, let's talk to Jon Zeigler, author of Architect of Worlds. Tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got involved with Ad Astra Games.
Well, my business in the gaming industry goes back to the 90s. I had a run of about a decade of writing and doing editorial work for Steve Jackson Games, which included working with Lauren Wiseman as the GURPS Traveller line editor for several years. So I have, in fact, also been a Traveller line editor, just not for Ken. Um, since during that period, I became known as the guy who wrote systems for designing star systems in role-playing games. I ended up doing 3 of those in the space of about 3 years. Once I stopped working for Steve Jackson Games, I started on a very long-running project to design what I would consider my final word. Well, maybe not final, but on how to design plausible star systems, planetary environments for science fiction. And that became the book Architect of Worlds, which probably took me about 8 years to write, edit, lay out, get finished. Not least because, of course, I was dealing with an area of science which was very much a moving target. So, every year I thought I would be done, and then, they kept discovering new stuff. I had to keep rewriting the book. So anyway, Ken and I have been moving in similar circles for years. We would occasionally chat. He knew I was working on Architect of Worlds. A couple of years ago, when I made it plain on my blog that I was in the final glide path to the book being finished, he cornered me one evening and suggested, "Hey, how would you like me to publish this for you?" And I kind of toyed with him a little. I let him think that I was thinking about it for 2, 3 weeks.
Yeah.
It didn't take me nearly that long to make that decision. So by the time it was finished, about a year ago now, it was published through Ad Astra Games. Has been quite successful since then. So, and we are, as we'll probably discuss later, thinking about revisions, thinking about add-ons, thinking about other stuff to do with the concept. So that's kind of how I ended up attached to this particular wagon train.
Cool. Well, welcome back, Jon.
Yeah, to build on that, because it's something we'll probably want to cover a bit. One of the things that I have an outline for is effectively Volume 2 of Architect of Worlds, that is all about the squishy stuff. Biology and making aliens and various things in how animals evolve and how they become social animals, and how social animals become tool users, and how tool users make cultures. And I have an awful lot of thoughts on that based on things I've written for Squadron Strike, because one of the things that I've noticed from player submitted setting designs for Squadron Strike is that, wow, you barely changed the skin tone of your Klingon XPs. Because there are about 4 different trope-tastic kinds of alien creatures, and then once you get past that, people go, I don't know. So I'm trying to give them a set of tools for that to work
that
from.
sounds cool.
Yeah.
All right, cool. And now we have that gets us to our newcomer, Matthew Francois, who's the first time here at the Mayday event. Welcome, Matthew. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got involved with Ad Astra Games?
I was first introduced to Attack Vector Tactical before it even officially released, which immediately destroyed all of my long-held preconceptions and loves of swooping starships as built up by George Lucas's Star Wars, and instantly fell in love with physics-based space combat. Here we are many, many years later, and I have joined the team several years ago as the line developer for Attack Vector Tactical. It has been a combination of a passion project to bring physics-based space combat to the tabletop without having to have a computer open in front of you, some digital archaeology, because a lot of smart people did a lot of hard work over the past 20 years of development that we had to recover and reinterpret. And, also a little bit of world building myself, because we have a setting that's uh, it's about humans. There aren't too many aliens there. It's about humans dealing with human problems, even though they've taken to the stars.
All right, cool. All right, well, welcome. We'll find out more about everybody's projects here as we go through our interview. It's very exciting. You have a lot of different irons in the fire as far as projects are concerned, Ken.
Mm-hmm. A few too many of them, and I want to get some of these things done.
Let's talk about what you've been up to since last Mayday.
Well, so we originally thought we were going to get Attack Vector 3rd Edition and Attack Vector Shipbook 2 out around summertime of last year. And it turned out that we grossly underestimated the amount of time that was needed to do this. Matt has been working on this a lot. I have been working on it. I've been trying very hard to steer clear of that, and only coming in when he asks me for help on certain things. One of the things that we did was we tweaked a lot of the underlying engineering assumptions behind a lot of things in Attack Vector, so that we had a more interesting and slightly better balanced game. It turned out that we were a little bit overly pessimistic on lasers, and we were a little overly optimistic on kinetic weapons, on coilguns in particular. And by doing so, by adjusting that with a wrench, basically, we ended up retuning a lot of the game. So there's a little bit more tactical decisions. We also closed off a couple of weird corner cases on the rules, but that's really more Matt's place to talk about. I came out with the 2nd edition of Romance of the Seven Realms, which we talked about last year at Mayday. It has been selling well. Nobody has sued me for doing store brand X-Wing. The fact that Atomic Mass Games shut down the former Fantasy Flight X-Wings miniatures line has caused a slow, gradual trickle of people coming into Squadron Strike through Romance of the Seven Realms. I have 2 other projects that have been hanging fire, but the big thing that happened last year was that my former business partners at Final Sword Productions, they're my age and a little older. They used to go to conventions, and now they don't, and they really couldn't handle the production side of keeping the Honor Harrington game line in work. So we worked out an agreement where I produce it. They technically still publish it and pay the royalties on it. And getting that up and running took a lot of work, in addition to the things that, getting an outside of the house job doing print brokerage was another thing that ate a lot of time too. And also finding the molds for the Honor Harrington miniatures.
Oh, yeah. Those are... I'm illiterate on Honor Harrington, but if I remember correctly, they're like cylindrical ships.
Yep. So it had been a while since Final Sword had ordered miniatures from the spin casting vendor. So I actually went on out and went into their back storage room, and they pulled out a whole bunch of spin caster things, and I went, "Yep, that's one of mine. That's not one of mine. What the hell is that?" And I'm going to be restocking some of those miniatures next week, actually.
Great, cool. So, let me pop over to Matthew for a minute. What would you say was the biggest hurdles of putting out the 3rd edition of Attack Vector?
So you asked for biggest, but in true interview form, I'm going to give you 3.
Okay.
The first was the digital archaeology for our ship design system. Unlike Ad Astra Games, Squadron Strike, or a lot of Traveller modules and things like that, we don't have a player-accessible design system. In part because the physics are complicated and there's a lot of interconnected things. It was run by a creaking old spreadsheet that produced at best questionable results. So one of my first tasks was to bring that into the modern era. And while doing that, we found a lot of places where the ships could either be slightly optimized, which is something a rational military would do, or have errors corrected. So while we haven't reinvented too many wheels, with one exception in Shipbook 1, if you've played Attack Vector Tactical before, um, we've subtly changed a lot of things to be both more physically accurate and a little bit more competitive in the game. That being said, if you're a fan of the SV Chocolati, you will owe it to yourself to check out the third edition version because it has undergone a significant change. Other than that, the other two things were just taking a look through the entire rule set. And like Ken said, looking at the assumptions that were made and looking at modern science and modern physics and tweaking things from there. Like John mentioned, science is a moving target, and we wouldn't have it any other way. But with those assumptions, we made lasers a little more competitive, kinetic weapons a little more balanced, and part of the reason it's taking longer than we expected was all the effects of that. I would say if you've played Attack Vector Tactical before, you are going to find that the rules are much more streamlined, a little bit more balanced, and we are really happy with the work we've done there. It is not an exaggeration to say that both Ken and I have gone literally page by page in the rule book for the upcoming third edition to make sure that it's all up to date before we release. We're planning to get that done by Origins.
I was going to say, did you go cell by cell through that spreadsheet, or did you just scrap it and start a whole fresh one?
What I did is I sat with that spreadsheet for many months and traced every little calculation, every place where premature rounding was introducing errors.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually have a pretty well-defined application that someone, in the future will be able to use a little bit more effectively, to say the least. The
Awesome.
spreadsheet, I know Ken has a special place in his heart for enormous, unwieldy spreadsheets, but this one had to go. Sorry, Ken.
That one was less of a spreadsheet than it was a Visual Basic for Applications program that was gnawing its way out of the carcass of a spreadsheet.
That checks out.
Sorry, it had to be put down.
Mm-hmm.
What was your third one,
got
Matt?
A broke leg.
Yes, I only covered two. I think the third one was just taking a look at all of the settings and the scenarios. We have a very dedicated playtester who has taken the time to go through every scenario, looking for balance issues, and again, making sure that when you play that scenario, you get a rewarding gameplay experience, both in terms of the tabletop experience, as well as the scores you all calculate at the end to see who quote-unquote won.
Gotcha.
And that very dedicated playtester, we also have a slight problem when they playtest scenarios because they have now played more Attack Vector than any other human being on the planet. So some of the problem is the problem with the scenario, or is the problem that you are playing against the person who has played more Attack Vector than anybody else on the planet? We should also tell the story about how we make ships for Attack Vector. So what happens in Attack Vector when we make ships is we have somebody pretend that they are a member of Congress or a member of Parliament writing a specification for a spaceship for a given faction. We then go and give that specification to Matt, and Matt goes and talks to one of our archivists who knows what technologies each of these factions knows how to make. And then Matt goes and tries to make as close to that spec as he possibly can. And then we hand it back to the person who wrote the specification, who goes, "No!" As they discovered that the specifications they wanted and what they can actually get have some divergence. This also helps us de-optimize some ships so that they actually look like they come from military contracting. And then once we've got a playable ship and it survives a couple of rounds of playtesting, we hand it back to our archivist, who then goes through and puts quirks into the class history and into the ship design. Little things like, oh, by the way, this particular ship has a problem with its coil guns because all of its ammunition is designed to this specification, and everybody else uses a slightly different specification for the ammunition. And the worst part about it is that, well, it's ammunition. We can put it in, and nope. That kind of detail.
Gotcha.
The Chinese, because of things that we did way back when, 20-odd years ago, we were doing something similar to the great game that was used for Traveller 2300, where people were basically role-playing the heads of state / military industrial complexes of these various factions. And we basically advanced the timeline by having them rewrite disaster news stories. And we would give them, hi, these are things that you might be able to research. We're going to secretly roll some dice, and you don't know how long it's going to take. What do you want to focus on? And the person who was running China wasn't an attack vector player. We gave him an option for a really nice high-tech reactor. And he rolled really well. And then he rolled really well again for the shrink bids. And so they got this really good high-power reactor that is too big for their frigate, that generates too much power for their frigate to use effectively, and two of them is not quite enough power for their cruiser. And you don't even want to think about putting this thing on a Corvette.
Interesting. That gives the ships a lot of individual personality.
Yes, it does.
Yes. So
we wouldn't have it any other way.
Right. So, what else did you get done? Did you put out a Architect of Worlds actually came out last year?
Came out last year.
And
we started shipping that to customers.
I didn't mean to make you talk while you're chewing on your food or coughing. I like the way that always comes up while you have food in your mouth.
Nope. We started shipping Architect of Worlds in May of last year, shortly after Mayday of last year.
Okay.
And it has been selling well.
Yeah, great.
John has only a few reasons to complain about his royalty payments.
I have no reasons whatsoever. Last year was my best year as a writer in quite some time.
That's great, man. John, what was what are the most difficult part? I mean, did you I guess what I want to know is when did you just decide, okay, that's it, I'm not adding more stuff. I can't keep chasing technology and advancements. I just gotta stop and put whatever I have this far into the book.
Roughly last fall. The overall design sequence for Architect of Worlds was finished
November 20.
I want to say about 2 years ago.
November 2023.
Yeah.
Was when we agreed to drive,
give or take.
Yeah, November 2023 was when we drove a stake into it.
Yeah. And of course, building that design sequence had a lot of challenges in and of itself, because there's a lot of... The ultimate goal is to be able to describe the current environment on the surface of a planet. But there's a lot of dependencies that point in both directions if you're not careful. So one of the things I absolutely did not want to do is have any loops in the design sequence, because that would make it practically unusable. I to this day, I'm not sure how I managed it. But yeah, after that point, we did make some changes because I kept reading more papers on various details of exoplanetary science, and it was like, okay, I can tweak what I've got and take this paper into account or this new piece of information into account. Part of the problem, of course, is that we're discovering new exoplanets practically on a daily basis these days. And every now and then we get things that just don't fit the existing models. And how do you tweak the model in order to cover these corner cases? But yeah, I want to say I was in the process of laying out and doing my final editing on the book most of last calendar year, most of 2024. And so I think about October, November of last year was when it was like, okay, this is the last paper I'm going to read on this subject and change Architect of Worlds about. And it was actually a fairly significant change. But fortunately, it was not one that required me to rethink the overall logic. It was just a matter of putting in a couple of extra cases.
Yeah.
And from that point on, there was nothing new. Now, I'm continuing to collect research and papers, and the science keeps marching right along. So at some point, I'm sure there are going to be add-ons.
Or second edition,
or second edition.
Right.
Exactly when that's going to start happening may have a lot to do with my personal life, which is a very bad news, good news situation right now. The bad news is starting roughly January 20th of this year, my employer became a lot harder to live with. And I have been unable to do a lot of new creative work for the past few months. The good news is, partially as a result of that, I'm going to be retired in about 5 weeks.
Oh.
At which point, I'm going to have more time. And there's a number of things that Ken and I have been talking about and that I'm hoping to do with Architect of Worlds once I'm pretty much my own boss. So, for example, one of the things I've been doing is using Architect of Worlds to write up planetary systems for known star systems in the solar neighborhood and publishing those to folks who subscribe to my Ko-Fi. Eventually, that's going to be part of possibly a complete setting book that may be its own role-playing game, maybe a Squadron Strike setting book. We'll have to see. But it's a setting I've been working on for many years, and I'm finally fleshing it out now that I have Architect and am able to do that. And of course, I've been thinking about producing short add-ons for special cases in world building or additional information that someone might want to develop. And of course, eventually building up to the second edition of the book, although that's a few years off. So after my Liberation Day, which is going to be mid-May, the door's open to start doing a lot of that kind of work.
Awesome.
And just to build on that, one of the projects I've had the privilege of working with Jon on, asked him a few annoying questions here and there, but Attack Vector Tactical Setting does also use real star data. So as part of just kind of a little bit of setting sugar, I have been working on recreating the Alpha Mensi system using Architect of Worlds. In the Attack Vector Tactical setting, Alpha Mensi is one of the systems that contains a habitable planet split between Novaya Russia and Novaya Brazil. And it was quite a treat. First of all, I've been using Jon's work since I don't remember if it was GURP Space or First In, which hit my bookshelf first, but it was one of those two. I'm sure Jon can tell you how long ago that was. But to actually get to work with him and create a system using the Architect of Worlds system, and also as a giant feather in his cap, using the system using the Architect of Worlds system produced a star system that matches almost exactly what we know about Alpha Mensi.
Cool.
one of the fun little asterisks to add there is while I was looking up data on Alpha Mensi to see, how I had to match it, it turns out that we now know that Alpha Mensi is a binary star system. We did not know that when Attack Vector Tactical 1.0 was released. Just to give you an idea of how much the science has evolved with not only exoplanet detection, but even just detection of stars.
Right.
When AVT 1.0 came out, we had no idea that there was a red dwarf companion around Alpha Mensi.
Cool. Where do you go
And
for
one of the-
your authoritative information about exoplanets, John?
That's actually in Architect of Worlds toward the back. There are databases maintained. I believe one of them is out of Strasbourg in France. They have all the catalogs of nearby stars available there, searchable, downloadable, really useful stuff. NASA maintains a exoplanet archive that keeps track of all the candidate and confirmed exoplanets that we know of. There are by now thousands of entries. And again, all that's in the back of Architect of Worlds where you can go find that stuff.
Oh,
I
cool.
can attest, I don't think I've ever actually had a new star discovered while I was working with the near solar data, but any number of times I have rolled up using Architect a exoplanetary system for some nearby star, and then while I'm doing that, a paper comes out that talks about, oh yeah, we've actually found exoplanets there, and I look, and it doesn't look anything like what I came up with. So, crumple, toss, have to start from scratch. This is absolutely a moving target. Probably will be for the rest of our lives. So, it's kind of exciting to work with.
Yeah, cool. All right, cool.
And as a little note, the planet Alpha Mensae 2, Novaya Rossiya, Nuevo Brazil, is in fact the planet that's on the front cover of Architect of Worlds.
Little trivia there. So, Ken, what about working on any novels over the past year?
Yes. One of the things that I also do is I edit science fiction novels on a freelance basis. And a friend of mine, Robert Hansen, was intrigued enough by what we were asking for Exile Stars that he started writing a novel based off of the seed of what was the first scenario for the Exile Stars product. Now, there are certain tropes in writing science fiction novels. There are certain stock characters that you use. You have the captain, who is distant. You have the executive officer of the ship, who is basically interfacing between the captain and the crew, because the captain needs to have clear decision making. You usually have you usually have a scientist or two, or a doctor, and you usually have one or two characters who are new to the bridge, who are junior officers, who become your characters that everybody lectures because they are brand new in their job, and thus you can lecture them and inform the reader of what's going on. So, there was an awful lot of this that was based loosely off of Star Trek. Star Trek with some different assumption settings. And there's a reason why it was based loosely off of Star Trek, because this setting grew out of an attempt to do Squadron Strike Starfleet battles back in 2013 that kind of blew up messily. And so I got angry. And rather than write about the things that I was angry about, I just channeled that energy into writing a setting. I was like, well, if you don't let me use your setting, I'll just make a better one. And we eventually did make a better one. Among other things, yes. But the thing that Rob did was that Rob noticed something in the details of the setting, and instead of telling our story of the survey corvette, the Nine Sing Rawat, from a mixture of perspectives of the XO, the junior officer, one of the scientist characters, and maybe the doctor as medical emergencies come up, his primary point of view character was a supernumerary Marine officer. Now, I want you to imagine a series of Star Trek episodes with much more grounded science, told from the point of view of a Marine officer. Somebody who isn't on the bridge when the ship is fighting with somebody who isn't on the bridge when the ship is fighting, and things along those lines. And we got to discuss a whole bunch of interesting bits of science. We got to discuss some interesting cultural quirks from the setting. And this has turned into what was originally going to be a pair of novellas has turned into basically a full-length novel, and another novella that is either going to be restructured and set up as a novella or tacked onto the end of the novel. That talks about a first contact situation with the Interstellar League bumping into an alien species that they know is out there, but they don't have all the details on it. And I had a lot of fun writing the setting Bible for Exile Stars. Jon still is interested in writing some fiction for Exile Stars when he has in that copious day when he has free time. But there are lots of interesting little bits of Star Trek, but not quite, or Star Trek and what happens if we actually do things consistently. For example, Star Trek has transporters, right?
Sure.
And the primary reason for having transporters was so that they wouldn't have to do launch and land sequences of the shuttlecraft, because that cost a lot of money to shoot. But transporters imply certain things, like it's a suicide machine, among other things.
Yes. Have you read the Physics and Metaphysics of Star Trek?
Why, yes.
Two different books. Yeah, it is. It's annihilation. But go on.
And we actually we actually address that diegetically in the universe. But if you have the ability to do a transporter, you also have the ability to do disintegrators. Because all a disintegrator is a machine that disassembles other things and puts those atoms over yonder. And that turned out to be the primary heavy weapon of the Interstellar League. So, imagine Star Trek, where the Enterprise isn't using photon torpedoes, it's using transporters to disassemble your ship around you.
That's cool, because a lot of times, at least in the TV show, photon torpedoes have no effect.
They're
like,
there is
with our hardest weapon, it's no effect. I'm like, when did those things ever have an effect? But go on, I'm just overly critical.
Yes, well, there's also this absolutely lovely YouTube video about about Voyager having only 37 photon torpedoes or quantum torpedoes at the end of season 1, and then it counts through all the torpedo launches through the rest of the season, and they shoot almost 100 more.
They're scavenging for resources along the way. Maybe with the help of Neelix's cooking, they kept the overall needs down, and we're able to replicate more torpedoes.
Well, when you're that isolated from home base, committing a war crime like putting Neelix's cooking into a warhead, that's what you have to do to survive and get home.
Captain, I propose we send Neelix's latest menu over to the enemy ship.
with tasting samples.
Yes.
Of course, if they made it today, you'd have to watch the Paramount Plus web series to see how they scavenged. It's a limited 10-episode arc.
Interesting.
Why look, we have sent over Gok tacos with a vinaigrette crunchberry dipping sauce.
That's how the war was started. Or ended.
Yeah, you can title that episode "A Last Contact" because they ain't coming back.
All right, man. So, what else you've been up to over the past year, Ken? Is there anything else we should cover before moving on to the current business?
Let me see. So let's see. We got the Honorverse miniature stuff back up. Yes. I have an outside the house job, which ate a lot of time. I basically became a print broker, which means that I go and talk to small businesses, or small businesses reach out to me, and say, we need, we run a contracting service. We need work shirts and business cards. We need advertisement things. And
Like
I
print
basically
stuff.
yep, like printing stuff. Yeah,
Mhm.
that's what a print broker does. And since I already do a lot of that for publishing things for Ad Astra Games, this allows me to leverage that, and I can direct them to some graphic designers so that their designs can not suck, or at the very least suck less.
Mhm.
And that has a busy season that basically runs from Memorial Day through late October. That ate a lot of my time. Plus, actually printing and packing orders, because this, as I said before, this is a one human supervised by one cat game company. And while I
Mhm.
have pictures of the cat doing quality assurance work on boxed games, he is awful about actually putting things in boxes that aren't his butt.
That aren't himself.
Yes.
All right, cool. Well, let's talk about Attack Vector 3rd Edition.
Okay. Matt and I are still trying to do the final, beat the last bits into place on the rulebook edit. It is my hope that by the time that Mayday actually airs, that we will be done with it. He said, hopefully, waiting for Matt to chime in.
That's my hope too. Like any long-running creative project, you eventually reach a point where you just want to see it off of your desktop, and I am definitely at that point. But like I said before, I do think the changes we've made are all improvements. And for anyone who's played Attack Vector Tactical in the past, or if you've always wanted to try it out, now is a good time. We've streamlined a lot of things and made the game, modern and competitive. We've got all new art in our shipbook. One of the things for the people who love lore, Ken slightly alluded to it before, but we don't just give you a book full of square boxes vaguely arranged in the shape of a ship. We do give you that, but on the facing page, you get a couple of thousand words talking about the history of that ship and how it was developed and how it's been used, and a full roster of ships that are in existence. So if you're the type of person who likes little lore crunchy bits, it's there for you. We've got,
Well,
a scenario book that tells the story of really humanity's first war since Earth was taken out of the picture. The pivotal event in our setting was Earth is lost, and probably for good. There is no way to get back to Earth or its massive manufacturing base. Everybody gathered together and sang Kumbaya for a while, but like any setting that involves humans, eventually humans take over and uh, started a war, mostly by setting off a nuke in the face of an opposing starship after they had been banned for very good reasons. And we tell the first half of that story. We tell the next part in the upcoming Shipbook 2, of how humanity is coping with, the first war without Earth to rely on. Beyond that, I'll let Ken chime in.
one of the things that is key to Shipbook 2 is that one of the factions that we have basically cobbled their navy together out of what we call orphan ships. Ships that relied on parts from Earth, ships that were from nations that don't have a strong interstellar presence but were cut off from Earth. And, there's a trope in science fiction of, well, the old stuff just works better once you dust it off and swap out the vacuum tubes with new vacuum tubes. And we play with this trope. And by play, we mean, oh, God, no, not this again. Oh. We literally have a ship class that's primary reason to exist is to act as a networking hub between three different other ship classes built by three different other nations that don't have compatible communication systems.
Okay. Target that ship first.
Yep.
Kinda, yeah.
I've done some integration projects, and yep, building a whole new ship class might just have been easier of getting 3 different government-owned communication systems to talk to each other.
There's also a thing while we were writing the Shipbook 2 lore bits, is I actually reached out to Ken and I'm like, are we overdoing it? Because every ship class includes the phrase, but due to budget and political constraints. And, it turns out to be, a very common lever that gets pulled is that, the military wanted 16 ships, the Congress wanted to fund 4, so they compromised and got 2.
It has actually been. And the British once Navy proposed, I believe, 4. Treasury offered 2, and they compromised on 8.
Mm-hmm. That kind of overshoot doesn't happen as often, though.
That's really rare.
Yes. And one of the things that we also ended up doing was streamlining how to fly gunboats during the playtesting of Shipbook 2. So one of the things that constrains ship designs in Attack Vector, if people who've looked at Attack Vector's cover art, you'll notice that there are big spiky bits that are at the back of the ship that are basically the radiators for the fusion torch engine. Fusion torch engines have a maximum drive output. You heat them up past that, they start to melt. So as the technology advances, your fusion torches have higher drive outputs, but that means that your ships get a little bit bigger, and your smaller ships have higher performance. And one of the things that we had to figure out how to do was streamline playing Attack Vector so that flying a tender and both of its gunboats was not a 2-person job to play a scenario. That's a lot of little subtle changes that are spread throughout the book and spread throughout the rule structure.
Mm. So you had mentioned earlier, Ken, that Attack Vector has some adjustments made for some new things we learned about physics. Can you give me an example of what that is, or what those are, or how you integrated them into the game?
The biggest one was that we assumed that coilguns could get to a much higher level of efficiency than they actually can. And what this changed out to was we basically increased the arming cost of all the coilguns. And this resulted in some serious balance shifts away from an optimum ship design, which is lots and lots and lots of coilguns and one of those big honking Chinese reactors. So coilguns can fire once per segment. Attack Vector is a segmented movement system. One turn is 128 seconds. One segment is 16 seconds. And coilguns generally can fire once every segment. Once you get to more power outputs, they have to cool off for a segment between firings. But there was an optimum point that used to be there, which was, let's just fire all the coilguns every segment and fill the map full of spam. And originally we thought, oh, that isn't much of a problem, and it turned out to be a balance problem. The other thing that we did was, since we don't actually know how to make the lasers in Attack Vector, but we did know that the lasers, after lots and lots and lots of play, weren't as competitive as they needed to be. We could just improve the efficiency of the lasers. And that's something that Matt and I have been going back and forth on for 9 months, trying to get laser tables that are competitive, that are also actually more accurate with physics. Because it turns out that a lot of assumptions about how lasers behave don't actually match how lasers behave.
Okay.
Yes, I have a slight amount of PTSD because we're discussing lasers, but over the past 9 months, we've sat down and run through equations of optics and fall-offs and how the wavelength would play into that, and then kind of put them in the churn because there are places where we make decisions that the physics would say A, but a good game would say B. So where do we draw the line and do that? Because at the end of the day, We do recognize that we're not, creating a CERN laboratory experiment of lasers. We are putting together a game that we want people to play and have fun. So finding the right balance was part of the effort for, especially for the laser tables, of how do we make them recognizable as conforming to real world physics while still being fun and competitive to play. Uh, and I think we've got there finally,
Mhm.
despite a little bit of PTSD on my part.
All right.
Yeah, it's really amazing how much of game design in this particular space involves compromises between the actual science and something that players are going to find usable and you know have repeat value for. Um,
And
it's all about building models which everybody realizes are approximations, but they're good enough for the purpose.
the other
Right. Good
thing
point.
with yeah, the other thing also is that we wanted to have different families of lasers so that we could keep some faction differentiation. This faction likes this particular subtype of laser. This faction likes this wavelength of laser.
Right.
Um,
Gotcha.
so that it's not everybody's using the same lasers, which is the way that Traveller does it. And
Yeah,
also,
I guess there's
what
like, pulse or beam or whatever, but there's not like much variation between, like, there's no like short distance, high damage, long distance, low damage, medium, you know what I mean? Like different, like you're saying,
Yep.
variations.
Yeah, and you just nailed the two basic variations of lasers. The short range laser system uses 2400 nanometer lasers with increasing aperture sizes as you get larger, as you get to bigger lasers. And they do truly horrific amounts of damage. And they're very power efficient. And the people who designed them decided to use that power efficiency to crank more power through the laser.
Hmm.
The MRLS system, or medium range laser system, is 1200 nanometer lasers. And you would think that they would have just exactly twice the ranges, but it turns out that's not quite the same. Shorter wavelengths basically are wavelength is the primary driver of laser ranges. Also, one of the things in Traveller that I will just point out here is that Traveller lasers have truly stupid long ranges. One of the things that has become something of a bugaboo of mine is that nearly every science fiction writer figures out what the maximum range of a laser is and doesn't actually think about what the targeting system is. So, when doing some work for David Weber for the Honor Harrington space combat game, Succardi Island, I went through and crunched his numbers again for him. And he has X-ray laser warheads that the bomb on the warhead detonates at about 30,000 kilometers from the target. And the target is roughly 800 meters long and is a couple million ton super dreadnought. So I actually worked out the geometry on that. And do you shoot pistols recreationally at all?
Yes, I have been known to shoot a pistol and a rifle.
Okay, so I want you to imagine that you are standing in the back of a Jeep and you are using a pistol and you are trying to shoot a penny that is edge on from you at 1,600 meters, which is close enough to a mile as to make no difference. And the Jeep is moving towards the penny, and you have to fire and you have to shoot before you get to 1,550 meters, otherwise you're dead. And the Jeep is swerving a little bit here and there to avoid things that are trying to shoot you. Oh, and also, about 10 meters in front of that penny, there is a mostly opaque shower curtain. That is about what that's about what an Honorverse bomb pumped X-ray laser warhead has to do to hit a super dreadnought.
Wow.
Because the geometry says that your target size drops so fast that you're shooting targets that are smaller than a pixel.
I see.
The target's there. It's just sort of a smear of, well, we think it's in this pixel, or it could be in these adjacent ones.
Remember when I told you that Ken ruined space combat for me?
Yeah. Now we need like a wide beam laser to just like get everything there.
Oh no, actually you get a much simpler solution. 30,000 kilometers is a tenth of a light second. If you make it so that that is the extreme end of your weapon range, as opposed to this is point blank, your life gets a lot easier.
Hmm.
And also it means that the maneuver of the ships becomes a lot more significant. You no longer need...
I can attest that Ken has caused me to rethink all of the space combat technology in my own settings 2 or 3 times so far.
Thanks,
Yeah.
Ken.
You're welcome. One of the reasons why Squadron Strike happened is because of the work we did for the second edition of Saganami Island. And the first edition of Saganami Island was a portive attack vector, and it was awful. We paid attention to David's numbers, not the emotional beats of the books. And it turns out that none of the tactics and battles that David describes work with the numbers that he uses. They're not even close. And boy, was that a horrible game to play. We published it in 2005, and by 2006 we were already working on the replacement, which we published in 2007.
All right,
and Squadron
Go on.
And Squadron Strike allows you to basically design any ship from any universe fully 3D.
Mm-hmm.
And that leads us to some of the design decisions we made for Squadron Strike Traveller.
Yeah. And part of which was discovering the enormous hole in any ship, any universe, centered squarely around Traveller ships between 100 and 1,000 displacement tons, which turns out to be because of the way Traveller set up some of its space combat assumptions and ship design assumptions, is Ken and I have looked at that from at least 3 different directions and basically come down to it with that would be a really nice product to be able to do. And it's not. The biggest problem from my angle, at least so far as I remember from our last shot at it, was that Traveller space combat weapons come in turrets. You can get up to a triple turret with up to 3 different standard weapons, and that just never quite worked out in the Squadron Strike design scheme, because you have a 100-ton scout with 1 turret and you put 1 lousy pulse laser on it, or you can have the same ship with 3 beam lasers, and it just gets not designable.
Yep. We also run into one of the fundamental problems of spaceship combat in RPGs, which is dolphins hitched to your chariot. I have just sent a image to the group chat, done by one of our artists, Claire PC. You should describe this as you look at this, Frank.
I can't bump out of there without losing the video feed. So sorry,
Okay.
but I know. But this is the 7th year I've heard the description many times.
Okay.
But,
you end up with a group of PCs that are all running a ship, but only one of them gets to make meaningful decisions, and that's the person who's steering the ship. And it becomes, if you guys don't stop fighting, I'm going to turn left instead of right, and only Rob will get to shoot weapons.
What about do you guys have any plan? Traveller just put out like a new High Guard, which is going to be all new weapon systems and design, and then they're also doing like their 5th Frontier War. Do you guys have any plans on hooking into those 2 things?
Nothing formal, but I've got those on my radar to dive into. That's clear up some reading space. See where they went relative to where we went, and how much I want to take what we're doing more in line with what they're doing. They're Traveller now. That's the really huge announcement that they made. Memory says late last year about it's their Traveller now. They took the line over from Mark Miller and are going with it and doing. They got great plans coming out, and love to line up with them.
Mm-hmm.
But we don't talk. but they're definitely putting more work into it than I am.
Yep.
So it's a little doing global alignment, which one of my key philosophies at work, where global alignment sometimes means doing it South San Francisco's way, which is where and sometimes it means lining up with the nice folks in Europe. So we'll see how it comes out, but I don't.
Or try to like tween it between their system and yours.
Or at least make it, or at least make the correspondences a little bit easier to understand. Because what we ended up doing with the Traveller stuff was make things that were fun to play in Squadron Strike, and weren't horrifically wrong on the basis of Traveller. But a lot of Traveller spaceship combat really didn't work that well.
Do you get anybody coming in going, well, actually?
We used to. When Squadron Strike Traveller first came out, I literally got a review of somebody who said, "You people have made Traveller space combat tactically interesting and fun. I hate it."
And the best part of that review was it was written post-purchase.
It was real.
Yeah, or more to the point, we already got his money.
Right, yeah. Hilarious.
But there are people.
Do you have to ever deal like not just with Traveller fans, but like do you have any Honor Harrington know-it-alls that want to school you on how to actually like build a ship or like?
Oh no, the Honor Harrington fans absolutely love Saganami Island Tactical Simulator and the crazy amount of detail that we extracted from David.
Cool.
In part because the process of making the game fixed a number of problems that David had with his universe. We have what's called the Great Resizing, because when David initially did things, he had ships increasing linearly with their mass, not at the cube root of the mass. And so in the first couple of printings of the books, we had super dreadnoughts that were less dense than cigar smoke.
Whoops.
And as part of the process of doing this, we built a database out of every single novel in the first 13 or 14 Honor Harrington books at the time, and was able to find out all the places where he listed a mass and all the places where he listed a dimension, and could give him a change log for future printings of the book, which Bain Books went through and said, "Sure, we'll make these changes."
That's cool.
Yeah, it's nice. It was nice to see a fiction publisher go, "You're right. We should fix that."
That is cool. Let's talk about
the fact that we made it. The fact that we made it really easy for them to do was another thing that helped.
Yeah, that's cool. Let's touch briefly before we move off of Attack Vector. You wanted to mention Shipbook 2. What does it have in it? What can readers and users expect? Players, what should players expect from your book 2?
I'll jump in here, and Ken can fill in any blanks I miss. The main focus for Shipbook 2, like we mentioned before, is a new faction, not featured in Shipbook 1, which came with the box set, that never intended to have a navy in the first place. As a result, they essentially have 3 different generations of ships. The first ships were basically samples they got from various navies that were willing to sell them samples. The second group was orphans left over after the loss of Earth. And then finally, the third group is they got their industrial base modernized and spun up to build their own ships. This means, in many cases, their ships aren't tactically compatible with each other. And this faction maintains a policy of armed neutrality. In this great war, the Saladin War, that is happening through Shipbook 1 and Shipbook 2, they have not taken a side, because they understand that if they take a side, it ends badly for them. The side they would most likely ally with, if that side turns out to be victorious, they would essentially end up as a client state. And then, of course, if they lose the war, they would, also not have a good outcome. So it not only provides some interesting ship designs that are not compatible with each other, but are very interesting in their own right, but also an interesting story and an interesting faction to play with. It was a challenge to write some of the scenarios, but we're really excited for it.
Can you give me some examples of a few scenarios that people might expect to find?
Sure. And in fact, if Ken's okay with it, I'll just go with the cover fiction scenario.
Go for it.
So it's the scenario I'm also writing the fiction for. Takes one of these new series ships, escorting a convoy to their nominally strongest supporter's base. Unfortunately, in the setting of Attack Vector Tactical, news travels at the speed of ships. And by the time they get to their destination, it has been conquered by the enemy. So the scenario we have set up is this group of ships trying to escape while being accosted by two ships from the opposing force, one of which wants to take it as a prize. It's a brand new shiny ship class. It's stumbled upon a recently conquered system. The other ship from the opposing force recognizes that this could lead to some very bad political consequences, essentially cementing another enemy in this war. And so you have two ships nominally on the same side with very different scenario goals against the other side, which is simply trying to disengage and get away safely. Which
And complicating the situation for the side that wants to just get away safely, they have an intelligence officer that is not from their navy on board that ship that they really don't want to hand her over.
So it nicely highlights also why I fell in love with the setting, because nothing is simply black and white, and it's not simply shoot your opponent until he stops moving. There's a nice political backdrop that if you choose to engage with it there, it's there for you.
Cool. Sounds
But
fun.
we also give you some really cool and crazy ships, like the Mexican gunboat that includes berthing for a crew to reload that gunboat, which when you're in a cylinder that's about 5 meters in diameter, would have to look it up. You can imagine having 20 men cramped in there for 6 weeks is not the most pleasant experience.
No, sounds like space submarines.
Well, at least it's easier to fall asleep in free fall. One of the other things that is, I mentioned that I've been teaching people how to design ships in Squadron Strike, and I handed off a project that I started and then realized I wasn't going to have time to a different designer, and that is the Ring Gate universe. That's the Ring Gate universe. And the premise of that is, remember Babylon 5, where you'd go through a jump gate and go into hyperspace?
Yeah.
And travel through hyperspace and come out through another jump gate?
Yeah.
Take those visuals and make the rings that let you get into jump space be 18.3 meters and 18.34 meters in diameter. And the physical constants in ring space are very, very different. And the way I describe the setting is that it's on the diffraction pattern between H.P. Lovecraft and Arthur C. Clarke.
Okay.
But that's also one of those ones where the physical constraints of how you get into hyperspace defines things on the ships.
Sorry, there's only room for your brain in a canister.
No, it's 18.34 meters is still pretty big.
That's true. Well,
it's about submarine
we have
size,
to take the whole crew of brains in canisters. So, let's see. You're working on Newton's Cradle?
Yep.
Why don't you tell people what that is? What's the difference between that and your other products?
So, Newton's Cradle is a no FTL universe. And the primary war we're talking about is a proxy war that's taking place in the Jovian, in the Galilean moons of Jupiter. One of the Martian governments decided that they were going to commit an act of terrorism that went horribly, horribly awry and set up a Kessler cascade through most of the infrastructure orbiting Earth. Which means that for a while, there's no way to launch anything off of Earth. This meant that the lunar colonies were no longer viable with their onboard resources, and pissed off a lot of people. And now we have lunar refugees living on Europa and getting ready to go colonize the oceans of Ganymede. Meanwhile, the Martians are persona non grata, but have been taken in by the Chancellor of Callisto, because Callisto happens to be one of the best trading hubs in the outer system, because it actually has less radiation on the ground than Earth does, because of where it is in Jupiter's inside of Jupiter's radiation belts. And so we have a bunch of ships, and it's very much got the feel of The Expanse. It is one of the games that I'm actually running today during Mayday as one of our introductory scenarios. And it has a very nice two-player war game that can also be used as an actual honest-to-God scenario generator for Squadron Strike. We have played this game a few times, and it is a really, really, really good two-player war game. The first time you play it, it'll take you about 6 hours. The second time you play it, it'll take you about 5. The third time you play it, it'll take you about 5.5, because you're sitting there going, well, all of these decisions suck. Which one of them sucks the least?
They seem to suck equally, but let me double check.
Yes.
But it's a lot of nuanced stuff. I mean, it's like, there's a lot of things to keep track of, at least. I'm not sure which version I played, but it was very cool through the computer interface and 3D dogfighting or combat. Well, I guess it's not.
Yeah.
I guess it's dogfighting if it's fighters, but it was fleet combat, but still, cruisers. Very cool. Mm-hmm. Very cool.
And of course, we're running our traditional Traveller, our traditional Traveller intro game for the people who come to Mayday and want to play Traveller. What's this setting? It isn't Traveller. Why should I care?
Well, it's Traveller flavored.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so that looks like we're all caught up with what's going on with this year. What's your future plans?
Well, one of these days, Mike and I are both going to have free time at the same time, and we're going to wrap up Traveller Shipbook 2, covering the Soleimani Rib War. He's written a lot of material for it. I have migrated up the ship sheets, and I'm about to migrate them up again for him and do some cleanup. And then we're going to go see what needs to be done to finish that product off.
Words, ships, and scenarios.
Yes.
All TBD on a chart I have open, a couple of windows stacked back.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll be looking forward to that.
And oddly enough, they have access to the guy who wrote the Soleimani Rim book for GURPS Traveller.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, nice to have him on board.
Which might indeed come in handy. Although I wouldn't mind having the person who did the Soleimani book for Traveller T20, because I'm using that as a big part of my source.
Mm-hmm.
And really quickly figured out that a lot of those ship designs are actual garbage.
Is there, maybe now that now that Mongoose has the Traveller IP, they've actually resurrected classic Traveller. Are there, when you sit down and do these ship design conversions, do you look at certain eras, or do you just try to look at the current edition, or have you tried like a scout ship from this era, a scout ship from that era? Do any of them match up good with your system, or are they all equally weird?
I actually used multiple sources to put together the first fleet book. The Aslan came out of a whole cloth, and I will. It's another year, and it's time for me to once again disappoint the people who are asking if there are Highguard ship designs or some other Traveller ship design behind the Squadron Strike designs, and the Aslans know there are not, and Fleet Book 2 will continue that proud tradition. The Imperial ships in Fleet Book 1 came out of Classic Traveller Supplement 9 fighting ships, and those were pretty well taken over. My missing the presence of a Meson screen on the Imperial Light Cruiser the first time through, and we're getting some background fluff out of that, so that's all to the good. And then the Zodani came out of Highguard designs I found online with using the power projection designs as the definitive version in case of questions, or I thought people did something stupid in Highguard that didn't have an in-universe justification. So that all came together from different places. I think the big part of why I didn't go for directly converting Highguard designs rather than saying, okay, this ship has a lot of missiles, a decent point defense, battery, this kind of spinal mount, and make a ship with those design priorities in Squadron Strike, because Squadron Strike and Highguard have very different determinations for things like how many weapons batteries you can put on a ship. Highguard goes more on volume, and admittedly, it's what you put on the surface for your beam laser battery is backed up by a lot of stuff hidden deep inside the ship, but that's still precious, limited, cube square law constrained ship resource.
Yeah,
And
Traveller
Squadron
doesn't.
Strike
Traveller is not aware of the square cube law when it comes to surface area limitations.
Oh no, it's not. Exactly. And Squadron Strike is, and so the sheer raw numbers just don't convert.
For example, the Plankwell in Squadron Strike has 24 large missile launchers. Can you pull up Shipbook 9 and tell me how many missile launchers the Plankwell should actually have? That was aimed at Mike. That might have broken his brain, or maybe he's going up to, or maybe he's reaching over to the appropriate bookshelf to find it.
Yeah, I'm actually going for an ebook first. Although, let me step into the other room real quick.
Sure, go grab the book. But we found out that there wasn't enough surface area for all of the missile launchers on a Tigris.
No.
There just wasn't enough. So that was one.
So which we just tried to go with roughly the same proportion in a particular kind of weapon category, and making sure that a fusion beam or plasma beam as it came out on Squadron Strike is the point blank heavy hitter weapon that you have your dramatic moment of roll ship, fire plasma batteries.
Mm-hmm. And one of the other things that we did was we basically turned sand into piezoelectric sand that is held in magnetic fields to act as an ablative defense.
Right, as like a point defense, or
no, as basically almost like Star Trek shields. Because what it should actually be is a hex in an altitude at 3D where you put a cloud of gunk out there, and over the course of the turn, the cloud of gunk starts out as a -2 accuracy check, -2 penalty accuracy rolls, and a -1 as it spreads out. But you're having to constantly shoot bearings to other ships and to that thing just see whether or not it's actually blocking your shot. And that quickly turns into something that is not fun to play.
If anyone's interested, the Plankwell had one squadron weapons mount, 50 100-ton bays, and 80 50-ton bays.
Yeah, I've got it as 80 50-ton missile bays, 100 triple beam laser turrets, 30 dual fusion gun turrets, and 400 particle accelerator turrets.
Oh yeah.
That's
Yeah.
straight out of supplement 9.
That's
And then
exactly what I was looking at.
That's
yeah,
a lot of that's a lot of guns.
yes,
Yes.
it is. And
Now I want you to
all I could
imagine
do
you're
with
rolling. Go ahead.
I'm
all I
going
could
to
do
roll
with
4,000 times.
yeah, all I could do with a plank well was prioritize. Okay, that's a really big missile battery, so we'll give it a really big missile battery, and on down the line.
Right.
And then yeah,
Gotcha.
Ken made it work with his revelation on how to implement standcasters, and then that gives you shielding, which is a simple mechanic, with an ammo counter,
Mhm.
and your magazines are hit locations on the ships.
Mm.
So that could add up. At some point, you're going to have to roll ship because you're running out of side on your port broadside.
You're running out of sand on your port broadside. But so
Yeah,
the standard Squadron
that.
Strike attack roll is rolling 4 10-sided dice. 1 for accuracy, 2 for penetration, 1 for hit location. So we have we have 400 particle beam installations. Rolling the attack roll 1 of 400, 2 of 400,
Yeah, no, that's
3
crazy.
of 400.
Yeah.
Well, although that isn't, the ships in that supplement were almost all designed for high guard combat, and high guard abstracted all those enormous batteries.
Yes.
So actually rolling all that into just a few attack rolls the way that you guys do makes perfect sense. It actually fits the flavor of the way the ships used to be used better.
Mm-hmm. It's like the David Weber experience where we figured out that the numbers were less important than the feel.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
That really is the final word on it. That's supposed to play like you think a plank well would when you look at the high guard stats.
All right.
And then I'm not going to go off this topic without mentioning my Sandcaster heresy. It's not absolutely not a magnetic generator and a cloud of particles. That's just silly. And even with how much other scientific hand waving Traveller is doing, that's still just silly. So it's in my head when I'm writing about Sandcasters, it's countermeasures, decoys, possible tech level 16 gravitic generators designed to gravitic lens incoming laser fire away from your ship, or just make the targeting systems think you're somewhere else. All sorts of crazy stuff, but no, it's not a cloud of sand.
Whereas I think it's a cloud of piezoelectric sand that is carrying an electrical field and is being manipulated by magnetic fields outside your ship.
It's a cloud of art glitter.
Yeah, literally.
Yep, pretty much, and
it's everywhere.
And if you've got really advanced computer systems, you can shape that cloud into an info hazard for the opposing targeting systems.
Yep. Yeah. Good point.
One of my favorite lines from Squadron Strike Traveller was in the tutorial, where we XP'd and put a friend of mine, Ethan McKinney, in as one of the junior officers on the ship that takes part through most of these scenarios that teach you the game. And he is really excited because they're coming up on a base that has been attacked by the Jodani, and it got nuked. But it got nuked at just the right distance that the neutron flux from the Jodani nukes just made the plutonium get runny on the warheads on the base. That's one of those lines that the captain of the ship's going, I really didn't need to hear that.
All right. Well, let's see. We're coming up towards the end of the interview here. Why don't I go around and each of you tell me where you see yourself next Mayday? Let's start with Ken.
Hopefully, still in business with a sane tariff situation.
Oh yeah. What's do the tariffs affect you? What do you?
They do sort of. I buy plastic components from China and laminated cards from China.
Mm-hmm.
And I bought a bunch of plastic components middle of last year, and I'm still paying that off. and got a bunch of laminated components and some stuff for Birds of Prey, the jet combat game that I sell, for their next edition, which is due out hopefully 2026. And the parts for Birds of Prey are sitting in a warehouse in China. The laminated cards that I was going to be printing to keep Saganami Island and Squadron Strike in stock pretty much for the next 5 years. We were doing final proof approvals when the first wave of tariff hikes went in. That jumped the tariff from 20% to 54%, and it is now 145%.
Yikes.
In a week. And that was April 2nd to April 12th, so 10 days. Fortunately, I can, all of my printing I do in the United States. Again, print broker, so I have sources for things like that. And a lot of my products, like all the supplements for Squadron Strike and Attack Vector, don't need any plastic bits. But it's, the box games, I need plastic bits and laminated cards. And nobody in the United States makes those cheaply anymore. So, yeah, it's hurting me. But for a lot of people, for a lot of game companies that had basically shifted most of their production over to China, this is oh god, sucking the second person to die of a sucking chest wound wins the marathon, right? It's bad.
Yeah, the Kickstarter board and RPG renaissance is at least temporarily over, because that kind of offset printing quality, what little there is of it in the United States, was already booked.
Mm-hmm.
So you're just gonna try to write it out and push back the release date of that stuff?
Well, I basically had 3 tranches of products. One of them was the stuff for the new edition of Birds of Prey, which is due out in 2026. So, between now, I may die, the king may die, the horse may learn to sing. The second tranche of products was getting the laminated cards for Squadron Strike and Saganami Island. And I have a good stock of those cards. It would have been nice to have a 5 or 6 year supply, just to ride this out. And the third tranche was getting laminated ship cards for 2 introductory products based off of Romance of the Seven Realms and Newton's Cradle. And those would have been new products that would have actually come out first out of those 3 tranches. They would have come out before Birds of Prey Second Edition, and would have been a nice, $25 to $30 introductory product that you buy it. You have some laminated cards for ships that you can mark up. You use your phone for replacing laminated cards that normally come in the box set. Comes with a hex map. Comes with box miniatures. Comes with punch out and fold up and tape together tilt blocks. And you cut apart the cover for the stuff on the backside for your altitude markers. And would have gotten you through 4 or 5 introductory scenarios and gone, so you're having fun. Here's what you buy next.
Mm-hmm.
And that can't happen until none of that can basically ship until the tariff situation hopefully reverts back to status quo ante. Because if I'm buying $10,000 worth of plastic bits and laminated cards and have 145% tariff on that, I'm paying $14,500 on just the tariffs.
Yep.
So that's that turned a $10,000 purchase into a $25,000 purchase.
Right.
And if I buy it now and the tariffs go down, I don't get the money that I paid in the tariffs back.
Right. Yep. No, just gonna have to write it out and postpone until things clear up. Hope it comes sooner rather than later.
Me too.
All right. So how about you, Ken? Where do you see yourself next Mayday?
You just asked me
sorry,
that.
I meant to say Mike. Sorry.
Me next year, hopefully talking about how well final round of play testing for Squadron Strike Traveller Fleet Book 2 is going. I hope people are looking forward to doing some territorial acquisition as Aslan.
All right. And what about you, John? What do you see yourself doing a year from now?
Well, I'm hoping to get my space opera role-playing game and some original fiction out the door. Being retired is certainly going to help with that. I'm also, Ken and I have been kicking around add-ons for Architect of Worlds. He's got his project for the second volume in the series, which I definitely want to get in on. What are you calling that, Ken? Symphony of Cultures or something like that?
Yes.
Okay. So and now I fully expect that project is going to be at least as complex as Architect of Worlds, because building biologies and cultures and technological civilizations, there's a lot of modeling going on in there that's going to have to be carefully considered. But there have been people who have done that before, both in Traveller and elsewhere, and so we've got some institutional knowledge to draw upon. So don't know if we're going to be anywhere near ready to start thinking about finishing that within a year, but that's something I'd like to spend some time working on.
Mm-hmm.
And okay.
Yeah,
So as far
I'm
as
really looking forward to getting so many of my projects that are on my desk off my desk.
And what about you, Matthew? What's your outlook for the next year? Where do you see yourself next year at this time?
Well, first and foremost, I hope to be able to say we successfully released Attack Vector Tactical 3rd Edition, as well as Shipbook 2. And then from there, I've got a couple of ideas, both crazy and non-crazy. We'd like to do a Shipbook 3, obviously. I think I have some ideas on what I'd like to see in it. I know Ken has some ideas. I know the other people that help us on Attack Vector Tactical have their own ideas. So we'll have to figure out which one of the ideas wins. I've also got some ideas for some campaign systems to bolt on to Attack Vector Tactical. Like everything Ken touches, he kind of ruined the idea of a territorial campaign, because if you think about how orbital mechanics works, holding territory becomes a very difficult proposition for most of space. But I've got some ideas on how to solve that to give players that mini game feel, um, that some of the more strategic minded players might want. So I would say this time next year, hopefully we'll be talking Shipbook 3, as well as some additional campaign options for Attack Vector Tactical. And I'm really looking forward to that because, like I mentioned, every creative project reaches a point where you just want to see it done.
Right. Get out, fly, launch.
Yeah, I'm also hoping we can actually put together Nexus Journal #2 with some more fiction and some more background lore and fun planetary maps for Attack Vector.
Yeah, cool. It's great to be productive, and man, you got a big backlog of projects and ambitious goals you've set for yourself.
It keeps us
All
out
of
of
you.
trouble, I would say.
Yeah.
You guys have time to answer a couple of silly questions off of my table of fascinating questions.
Sure.
All right.
Sure.
It's a D66 table, but so if you don't have dice handy, we'll just give me a number. If for those not familiar with D66, did you know that you can generate numbers between 11 and 66 using just one 6-sided die or two with different colors?
in point of fact, I have a bunch of 6-sided dice right here.
Great.
So you want the D66
you're prepared.
roll?
You get to roll first.
I guess so. And lo and behold, I got 11.
11. If you were an interstellar merchant, what kind of cargo would you haul?
Art, music, and blueprints.
Art, music, and blueprints. Do you have an explanation?
Nothing physical or bulky would be worth hauling those distances.
All right, good. All right. Who wants to go next?
I'll go ahead.
Game.
Roll for
Okay.
me. I don't have dice handy.
Okay, I'll roll for you. 43.
43. All right, Matthew. I'm guessing, are you a tabletop RPG player?
I am.
What's the most unexpected plot twist you've ever experienced in an RPG game?
I was running a West End Games D6 Star Wars game when, by a series of exceptional rolls and just random happen chance, my players killed the bad guy who was supposed to harass them for the next 6 months of gameplay. I, seizing the opportunity, actually left him dead, and the players, being RPG players, continuously thought it was a ruse. And it wasn't until months later that they finally realized, oh wait, he's really dead.
He wasn't just
And
ambiguously dead. He's really
it
dead.
wasn't just ambiguously dead. And it was a great inversion of a trope, and it's a story we still talk about to this day.
It's awesome. I love memorable stories. That's what tabletop RPGs, can really provide people, like stuff that they remember forever. Because I don't know. Apparently, your brain has a hard time distinguishing fantasy from reality sometimes, and it's like something you actually did. All right, who wants to go next?
I'll go, and can I volunteer for the same question? Because I thought of something that my players pulled on me
Sure,
once
go ahead.
upon a time. It was actually a Traveller game. I at a fit of inspiration did a apocalypse, powered by the apocalypse take on Traveller, Spinward Worlds, and I was running Double Adventure 1 across the Brightface, which is the setup is that 4 months ago you and your buddies retired and decided to crew up on somebody's now private spaceship and bop around doing the A-team in space thing. 4 weeks ago, you took a job as a bodyguard. 4 days ago, you showed up on planet and started the grand tour. And 4 minutes ago, you botched the job when a sniper took your boss's faceplate out on an outside excursion. And now you on the wrong side of the planet from your ship in the middle of a revolution where you are clearly identified as being on the part of the bosses. The first thing that came up is, okay, well, we're being shot at, and we're to have to deal with that. So players broke into the facility where the sniper was shooting from, and were the guys who were wanting the your former boss's briefcase full of bearer bonds, and they did a really stupid thing. You know the trope where you cut a hole in the floor and then just drop down into the other room and shoot everybody?
Yes.
Well, powered by the apocalypse lets you create some moves for players to do some really wild things, and I had a move called Grand Entrance. Roll plus cool when you burst into a scene and grab everybody's attention. It's basically to give you a fictional lever for, okay, everybody should be shooting at you, but you've got a beat. And they said they were going to do that. I said, okay. And I'm thinking, okay, this is a really good way to get a TPK about 30 minutes into the game. Player in question rolls boxcars. And okay, that went really well, and you've got everybody captured, including the nemesis I was planning to have chase them across the Brightface. So they bail off. They take the head bad guy with them as sort of a hostage. So, okay, great. Now it's his wife on the radio making threats and issuing demands. And so that's okay. Whole new bad guy with a personal interest in the players that the players are responsible for. And so that went pretty well, and they did actually manage to get off planet. Next time I run that scenario, I'm going to start it not at the point where the job goes bad and you're running for your life, but when you get on planet, to give the players an opportunity to see what's going on from the workers' perspective and maybe run that scenario with the players on the side of the revolution.
All right.
Vive la Denham.
That's a good story. All right, Ken.
So rather than roll, I'm going to tell about the dungeon world scenario that I used to run regularly at conventions. Um, the program listing was, "You can't take the wine dark sea from me," and it starts out with me handing out 9 playbooks, one of which is mandatory, which is Captain Malkomos, captain of the trading galley Serenity, with the witch Inara, and the big Chonkan warrior named Janos. And you get the feel, you get the idea here. You are basically smugglers going across the Aegean, bringing supplies to Agamemnon's forces on the plains on the plains of Ilium, with a mishmash of Firefly. And the usual opening on this is I basically have 6 players and hand out 9 playbooks and tell them the ones with the blue dots on them are mandatory. And let them pick the ones that are appropriate, and that's who the cast is for this particular run. And I try very hard to make sure that the person who's playing Malkomos is one of the players who shows the signs of being good at improv. Because I will start it off with, "Captain Malkomos, as you are on the deck of the Serenity, as it's being torn apart by the rival anger of both Poseidon and Boreas, what the hell did your crew do on the docks of Pylos that offended the gods so?"
And then go from there.
And then you kind of go from there. And if you're having a whole lot of fun, the other thing you do is you riff off of various events from the Odyssey and a little bit from the Iliad. Because some of the players will get it, and so many of them don't. And so they think it's being novel and new.
Right. Or they might be just so focused on the Firefly aspect that they're missing the references to Greek mythology or whatever.
And ideally, you've got somebody in there who's riffing on the Greek mythology references and has no idea what Firefly is.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. All right.
A mix of those people in there would make for some really interesting after table stories.
You guys want to do another round of questions of interest, or shall we wrap this up?
I'll go.
All right, go ahead.
$45.
45. What's your favorite? Well, these are in terms of Traveller, but you can sub your favorite other game. What's your favorite Traveller house rule or homebrew mechanic?
I'm going to be completely egotistical and say Spinward Worlds, which is a whole hack. Not just a house rule, but I wanted to do Traveller in a slightly different way, and it's playable. At the very least, I could run it.
All right, cool. Anybody else want to take another?
Sure.
All right.
42.
42.
Life, the universe, and everything.
If the Imperium suddenly drafted you, what branch of service would you want to be in?
I would like to be in the Navy, but not on a ship, working in the Academy, teaching 3-dimensional vector movement tactics.
There you go. All right. Matt, you want to take another question?
I'll do one more. Then I have to head out. So
okay.
Give me a good one. Somebody roll for me.
Somebody roll.
14.
14. If you could visit any planet in any sci-fi IP, where would you go first?
That's a tough one. The easy answer is I'd love to see Alpha Mensi, since I've been developing Alpha Mensi 2 for several months now. But I honestly would have to answer someplace like Coruscant. There has always been kind of a romantic space opera draw to the the planet that is a city, and I think the fascination there with urban landscapes would draw me in there. But that's a very tough question because I think narrowing it down to just one or two is almost impossible because we all hold those sci-fi worlds in our imagination. So
That's true. All right. And John, how about one more?
All right, one more,
And we'll wrap this up.
25.
25. Would you rather be a free trader or part of a mega corporation?
Well, in theory, a free trader because, I've just spent, in real life, I've spent most of my adult life working for other people. So being my own boss is one of the more attractive things about this. On the other hand, free traders generally have to scramble really hard just to make ends meet. So
That's true.
I think I would probably end up going that way, but it wouldn't be for an easy life, that's for sure.
All right. All right. Well, guys, we've come to the end of our interview, and thank you so much for joining me for this Mayday 2025 event.
Thanks for having us.
you're
Absolutely
welcome.
happy to show up every year.
My guests today have been Ken Burnside, the creative director of Ad Astra Games, Mike Llaneza, the line developer for Traveller, Jon Zeigler, the author of Architect of Worlds, and Matthew Francois, the line developer for Attack Vector Tactical. Thank you all for joining me for this, the 7th annual Mayday Mayday event. And thank you, dear listener. Until next time, happy traveling. Don't fly solo through the galaxy. Click like to join our alliance. Subscribe for your crew pass, and enable notifications to never miss an encounter. This journey is fueled by my patrons. Thank you, patrons. Feel the thrill of discovery. Become a patron and join the adventure.